it's also one of these things that it will put you in the ballpark and you still have to tweak it. But there's tremendous strides that are happening. I'm so pleased because for years and years, all we did was we got plugins that were emulations of analog hardware.
Right.
Finally, we're going away from that. We're getting, and this has been the last 3 years, the trend, thinking outside the box. It's like, okay, enough of that. We don't need another 1073, or another, Lexicon 480 plugin. So yeah, I think it's very healthy. I'm really happy at some of the results as well. Every time I try something, it's like, oh yeah, it works. Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Do you think that with that kind of technology, it'll enable artists to kind of become their own audio engineers, and to like what extent maybe that's the case? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I've always felt, and we have this in mastering, by the way, as well, online mastering, which kind of got a bad rap in the beginning. And the reason why, again, it's AI driven, so it got better and better the more work it got, and we're talking, whichever one you use.
Right.
And now it's pretty advanced where, it can be pretty good. And I think it's the same way for an artist where it's going to get you in the ballpark faster, easier, better, probably keep you away from mistakes that you ordinarily would have made. I think that's important.
Right.
It might not be, the final of anything that you need, but it will get you in the ballpark and maybe, get that demo.
Right. Or the rough mix, like closer to the vision. Yeah, I mean, a lot of top mixers are basically just tweaking rough mixes and getting them to feel a little bit better at this point, right? Like that's what they're getting paid to do. It seems like, get the Pro Tools session and just like a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
They're finishers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's cool to give artists that kind of power to kind of be their own technician if they want it, and we'll see what happens with it. Like I don't know, I've mixed feelings about it because like on the one hand, like I think serious artists do seek out producers, but some artists can do it themselves.
There's a certain skill, and that skill to some degree will probably go away. But look at it like this: we used to have typewriter repairmen who were really skilled at what they did. And now today there are, literally no typewriters.
Except for funsies, right?
Yeah, and nobody regrets the transition. So it might be something like that. I mean, we're going to have that in cars as well, where eventually it'll be all electric and
maybe self-driving.
Yeah, self-driving, so there'll be far less repairmen.
Right. I would love to have more electric cars, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I love how just tech forward you are, and you're just like, okay, we need to make progress, and like, okay, the 1176 has been emulated enough times. Let's move on. I'm assuming that you're like an in the box guy. You don't like. What are your thoughts on like analog gear? You're over it.
Well, I think it does sound better still a little, and it can get you there faster. But it can also be negligible. And there have been mixes that I've done where it's like, I don't know that I could beat this analog-wise. And I think everybody sort of says that now. I'm not against using analog. The only thing I'm against is if you're using any kind of outboard analog gear, can you repeat what you're doing? Because the world we live in now requires repeatability and instant repeatability.
The recalling.
So that's the recalling. It's the big downfall of any kind of outboard gear. Of course, if it's just a passive, or if it's a summing mixer where there's no control on it, it might be a different story. But even then, it's like, do you really need it?
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody who was telling me it sounds better, and so, but he stopped doing it because of, I guess, recall and being lazy, and it just has just using different ways inside the box to kind of achieve the same effect of the. This is Ignacio Molino, who's done a ton of great Latin records. He was telling me he uses reverb instead of analog to kind of get that kind of depth or whatever, which was really interesting. I've never heard it described that way before.
I've had him on my podcast as well. I remember him
really?
saying that.
Oh, that's amazing. I just found out about him. It was great.
Yeah.
Super. Yeah, you've had everybody. It's amazing. I guess speaking of podcasting, what's been your favorite part about being a podcaster? I could tell you what mine is, but I'm curious to hear yours.
Okay, well, let me say that I am reluctantly a podcaster. Or in the beginning I was. I was originally on a podcast. It's still going on. It's 14 or 15 years now. It's called Audio Nowcast. And really what it is a roundtable of audio geeks from different disciplines. And it's a load of fun. It's really good. It doesn't happen regularly, maybe once a month. And sometimes it goes for months without doing it, but it's been going on for 14, 15 years.
Wow.
And there was and for a while there was no guests. It was just, a bunch of us that were kind of talking about the latest. Anyway, there was a listener that sent me an email and said, you should have your own podcast. And I sent back to him, yeah, but it's more time and stuff that I just don't want to do. And he says, look, I teach people how to do this. If you do the interviews, I'll do everything else. I thought, okay, fair enough. So that's the way it went for about the first 100. And then he said, I got a new gig. I don't have the time to do it. So then I took over everything, which actually was a blessing in disguise, because then I was able to bring my audio expertise into making it sound better. And it really did. It took a big jump at that point in the sound quality. And also in editing, because he was editing it and not really editing much, and I really got into fine-tuning it.
Mm-hmm.
My whole idea behind that is I want a guest to tell me this is the best I've ever sounded. And I go in and I get rid of all the spaces, all the uhs, all the, all those things, because I want them to think, I really sounded smart.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have the same goal, by the way.
Yeah, good. Anyway, I've been offered, as a matter of fact, just earlier this morning, I was offered another sponsorship, and I've turned them all down. The reason why was, in the beginning, it was just for branding. I wanted to, brand the Bobby Owsinski brand. And it got to the point where, mission accomplished. I think my brand is pretty established. But even so, by not taking sponsorship, advertising, any of that stuff, it still allows me to stay as fair as possible. So if I deem to criticize something, I don't do that often, but if there is something that requires me to do it, I don't feel beholden to a sponsor or someone like that.
Wow, I totally hear that.
My most fun, though, is meeting new people.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, same. I got into it trying to make content, right? I was like, I have to put something out on the internet, otherwise, like the brand recognition, like you said. And then at a certain point, it was like, it was certainly helping in a very not like a straightforward way, but it was helping me. But more than anything, it was helping me build relationships with people in the industry that I would have never met otherwise. Because I'm out here in Israel, right? So I made it to one AES, which was amazing because it kind of just showed me like, oh, there's other people here. Like I could just like schmooze with them. That's neat. And then having a podcast enabled me to kind of realize like, oh, let's like actually talk with people and be real. And that's been the biggest game changer for me, is to kind of have a little space in this audio industry by meeting people. One
of the things I sort of pride myself in is that every podcast that I do, we always laugh. So it's light enough that, we'll just share a laugh on something, or many of them.
Yeah.
And I always thought, that's pretty cool. I like that. I like the fact that, and I don't think I was like this in the beginning. I was, very stiff, as most people are.
I tell people it took me 50 episodes to get good and 50 episodes for it to become sort of easy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably it. But for me, the first 100, we're talking to friends. Maybe it was 150. I was just talking to friends, people I know that, I run into all the time. So that was kind of easy. Here's the second thing, though, I have to say that I like about it. If I am interviewing a friend, I've gone through most of them now, I think, but you never really know someone until you interview them. Mm. And one of my best friends I had on, and at the end I'm going, I didn't know that about you. And I've known the guy for 30 years, and it's like, wow, I didn't know that. So that's one of the cool things about interviewing people is you do learn things that you might not have learned about them otherwise.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's interesting. I know I need to think a bit more about if I've had any revelations. But I guess most people I'm interviewing are new, so everything is new. You know what I mean? But maybe, but when I do a second interview with somebody, then I learn even more. And then it's more casual, and it's more like, oh, don't just tell me about yourself. Like, how's it going? And then things get even more interesting sometimes. So yeah, it's definitely a really cool space. I feel like podcasts are like the only place on the internet where people actually talk to each other. You could kind of
maybe right there.
And like, rather than being in your own little echo chamber or bubble, you can kind of communicate with other people and kind of see the commonality, the common human experience, which is, I think, super important these days.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, totally. Well, your podcast is great. People should definitely go check it out. I've already pushed it like twice. But
thank you.
Before we get into your newest book, I do also want to talk about the Ken Scott book. I mean, Ken's an inspiration. I think you mentioned that he's one of like five Beatle engineers. I don't know how many there were. I know
yes,
Geoff
there's
Emerick.
only five, and he was one of them.
Yeah, amazing. And I also read Geoff Emerick's book, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And for me, like, if you combine the Beatles plus audio engineering, I'm in. Like, that's like two of my favorite things, right? So what was it like? I don't know, working with Ken on that book, and maybe you could shed any insights that you learned specifically from him.
Well, it went even further than that. After the book, I was producing a project, and I'm one of these guys that I can't engineer and produce at the same time. I can overdubs, but not on basics. So I always hire somebody, and always somebody really good. And I went to Ken and I said, will you do this for me? And he did. And we actually did more with him than I usually would have, did overdubs and everything. And even I let him mix. And that was cool because for me, a lot of it was validation. Where I would see him use something or see a technique, and I think, oh yeah, I would have done that too. On the other hand, there was some revelation. One was when we were setting up for basics the first day, the studio had a beautiful C12, and he put it in front of the bass amp. And I went over and I looked at him, and I kind of, raised my eyebrow, and he said, "This is what I used to use on Paul all the time," meaning Paul McCartney.
Oh my
God.
God.
Okay. So then the stupid bass player comes in who doesn't understand who Ken is, and he starts to rant and rave about why are you not using a B-52 on it, or, and he's going on and on. And finally I had to pull him aside and I said, "Hey, do you realize who this guy is? Do you realize how he's going to make you sound?" And he did. He made him sound fantastic.
Wow.
Better than he ever could have, than I could have probably. So anyway, it went one step beyond the book in getting to actually work with them.
Yeah, you get to witness that kind of, that, I don't know, it's like a legacy almost, of just putting that C12 on the bass cab. That's amazing. Yeah.
I'll tell you though,
wow.
the book was loads of fun, and not for why you might think. You probably know. You probably can't remember what you had for breakfast 2 weeks ago. So it's the same way over 40 or 45 years, remembering exactly what happened. And Ken would frequently go, I just can't remember. Call this person, and next thing you know, I'm talking to 4 or 5 other people that were there. And it was, after a while, I talked to so many people and I got so much input, I began to feel like I was there myself, vicariously.
Wow.
So that was really fantastic because it wasn't just Ken, it was a lot of other people. It was kind of verifying him. Now, there was one situation, though, that really proves that you can't really rely on your memory. So I told you I'm from Minersville, Pennsylvania, population 5,000 or 5,500, something like that. I go back for Christmas and I tell them that, I'm working on this book. And a roadie that used to work for me said, "Oh, you know what? I have pictures that I took at Trident when Ken was there." Now, it turns out after this guy was a roadie for my band,